Hey folks, I'm Mark Ryan. This is Super Review, and today we're going to take a first look at the Dunu Zen. I don't know how I messed that up, but if you remember a few months ago, maybe a couple of months ago, I reviewed the Dunu SA6, which was an all-balanced armature earphone that I quite liked. In fact, I think a lot of people quite like the Dunu SA6. In fact, I've been listening to it earlier this week. I'm a pretty big fan of it. And here with the Zen, Dunu's kind of positioning this as the alternative to the SA6. In the sense that the SA6, like I mentioned, an all-balanced armature set, but here with the Zen, we're looking at a single dynamic driver, so kind of like opposite ends. But it's not just any dynamic driver here in the Zen. This is a big old stonkin' boy. It's a 13.5 millimeter dynamic driver, which when I do that doesn't look that big, but that's pretty big for an IEM driver. And there's some other details about the dynamic driver that we'll get into when we start looking at the back of this box, but I don't know, I haven't listened to this earphone yet. This is gonna be our first impressions. Let's go ahead and we'll open up the box, we'll find out what we get inside with the Zen. Then I'll do a little bit of a fit test and give you some impressions of the build quality of it, but I'm not gonna be able to tell you anything about the way this thing sounds because I haven't heard it yet. That said, I do have my graphing rig set up, so we'll measure this thing, we'll get a frequency response out of it, and then we can guess. But otherwise, if you want the review of the Zen, stick around, subscribe to the channel, ding the bell, etc., and we'll do that review at a later date. For now though, let's check out what's inside the box of the Zen. I'm trying to bring back the spin, but you see why I don't do the spins live. They're pretty lackluster, frankly. But here we do. We got the box for the Dunu Zen, and frankly, this is a pretty handsome box. Actually, a thing I forgot to mention during the introduction, pricing. I think that's relevant. This is a $700 IEM, so not cheap. And if you compare this packaging versus Dunu's other packaging, like the SA6 and the SA3, this does look like it's a little bit nicer. Not that the SA6 is necessarily a budget IEM either, but I do like what they're doing here, but not a lot of information here in the front. Flip it over, we do have some info here in the back. For the specs, folks, let's see what we can get through. All right, brand Dunu, model Zen, got it. Weight, 21 grams. This is actually notable because I think this IEM is gonna be a little bit on the heavy side, but not like that heavy. I think the heaviest IEM that I've got is the Eco OH10, which is about 30 grams, and that's without the cable. I'm not sure if that 21 grams counts the cable or not. Frequency response of 5 to 40,000 hertz, pretty typical claim, doesn't mean that much to me. Sensitivity of 112 decibels, I assume that's at 1 milliwatt, so a fairly sensitive IEM actually, given the fact it's a big 13 millimeter dynamic driver. 16 ohm impedance, which that typically just doesn't mean as much as the sensitivity rating. In fact, when you're doing your own research out there, just take that in mind. And then total harmonic distortion of 0.2%. Again, I don't think that actually means that much to me, frankly. Here's where I mentioned there was a little bit more information about this dynamic driver. It's a magnesium aluminum alloy dome with nanoporous amorphous carbon layer and fully independent suspension surround. You got that? Repeat it back to me. I mean, frankly, I don't know what that means. I do know that, we got a little bit of backstory on the Zen from Dunu and the Super Review Discord channel. If you're interested in that sort of stuff, join the Discord channel. I've got a link in the description down below. But there in the Discord channel, a Dunu rep kind of talked us through some of the history of this IEM, how I think they originally conceived of this back in 2017. They had some plans for it to be a beryllium driver at some point, and then it would have been a more expensive IEM than it already is. But because of COVID, apparently beryllium is actually kind of tough to come by, and so their alternative is magnesium aluminum alloy dome with nanoporous amorphous carbon layer and fully independent suspension surround, which doesn't sound quite as cool as beryllium, but I don't know, maybe you can make a cool acronym out of it or something. Anyway, that's about as much as we're gonna find out from this box, so let's go ahead and push it open. Let's see what's inside. Set this aside. That is I like the gold foil. I shouldn't like the gold foil, but I do. We got a fairly handsome little box. Let's see. Is this a drawer style box? You always gotta wonder, ooh, it's a magnetic flippy box, and treated to a pretty nice presentation. Designed by Dunu, okay. It's kind of who I expected designed it. We've got the Dunu cable, which we'll go into a little bit more detail about in a little bit, and then the IMs, which I'm gonna set aside now for a second. Let's see what else we got inside this box. All right, we got some knickknacks inside of a paper box. This feels actually surprisingly on the heavy side. And what we have is the same Dunu case that came with the SA6. I actually find this to be one of the nicer cases out there. It comes with a number of tips inside. We'll take a look at what's inside there. But yeah, this is one of the nicer IEM cases, frankly. And they do also give you one of these little pouches for holding your IEMs independently. I know Campfire does this with a lot of their IEMs. Frankly, I don't know. Maybe because it's an expensive IEM, you might be a little bit more careful with it, but personally, just not the thing I'm likely to use myself. Let's put this stuff aside though, see what else we got. We got your QR codes for the enthusiasts out there. All right, someone's gonna tell me what that says. Some sort of certificate. And here it looks like we've got a cleaning cloth. Oh, Dunu. You shouldn't have. That's actually a really nice feeling cleaning cloth. It smells like a cleaning cloth. I don't know why I felt like I had to smell it. And here we've got a package that looks like even more tips. Interesting. So there's a lot of tips that are coming here with the Zen. And again, we'll go through these in a little bit more detail in a second, but there you go. Put those aside for now, and well, let's go and pull this thing out. So I talked about, or I mentioned we would get to the cable, and these little pieces in here are going to lead us into the next bit of the discussion about this cable. If you haven't before seen one of Dunu's cables, these are some of, if not the best IEM cables out there for a couple of reasons. One, they're just really nicely made cables. Like they've got a nice weight to them. And this seems to me pretty similar to the cable that came with the SA6. It's a little bit on the thick side, but really just a fantastic cable. And I think aesthetically, they also look pretty nice. But you can see, right, out of the box, right, it's not especially stiff, it's lying flat, it doesn't have any memory. That's what we typically like to see in a cable. But just the general thickness and the quality of the cable is only half of the trick here. The other thing that's really cool about Dunu's cables is this right here. So this end, as you can see, and that's not going to plug into any audio device you've got, but it will plug into one of these connectors. So a lot of the times when you're picking out an IEM cable, you got to choose between your standard 3.5 millimeter connector, maybe you want a balanced 2.5 millimeter connector, or maybe you want a balanced 4.4 millimeter connector. Dunu, the way that they do their cables, you don't have to choose. You get all of them all in one package. Personally, I'm frankly a big fan of the 3.5 millimeter still, so that's what I'm going to go ahead and start with. Let's go and see if I can throw this on here. And the switching mechanism is actually pretty clever. You just have like this little sleeve here that you pull down, and that will release it enough so that you can pull out the tip and then swap to another one. All right, so that is the cable. Let's set you aside over here, Dunu. And then take a look at these tips that they supplied, which is a lot. All right, so in here, this is actually not a tip. This appears to be an airline adapter. For all those airline trips we're all taking right now. Actually, if you're here in the live chat, what is the last time you were on an airplane? Has it been recently? Because it's not been recently for me. But there you go. It's nice that they include that, I suppose. And then in here, it looks like we've got a 1/4 inch adapter. So I'm actually kind of surprised that Dunu doesn't make one of these adapters in 1/4 inch size. I mean, it does seem pretty overkill on an IEM, but if you're gonna do it for all the other ones and you're gonna include a 1/4 inch adapter in the box, a little surprising that that's the way they do it, but there you go. There is your 1/4 inch adapter, and I'm pretty sure that is from 3.5 millimeter. In fact, yeah, and guaranteed it would have to be, because you don't want to go from balanced to unbalanced sort of via a normal adapter. It's going to be bad news. Here we've got some sort of hair clip. I'm not really sure how to use that, but okay. I guess my hair is getting a little bit on the long side, so I should probably figure that one out. And then a toothbrush for cleaning your IMs and even more tips. All right, let's get these things out here soon or quick. But these appear to be pretty typical Dunu tips. I'm curious how these things are different from the ones that they've packaged in this little clear capsule. You like how I overpronounced the letter U in the word capsule? It's not a thing I normally do. And in fact, I'm not sure why I did it. So these white tips, I think these look like the same tips that I used on the SA6. And then here, these appear to be, I'm gonna guess, a set of foam tips. And I was right. I am so good at guessing foam tips. Interestingly, actually, let's punch in on that. These foam tips look a lot like the foam tips that I've seen with some Sennheiser IEMs that I've got, where they've got like this little cross pattern. Can you see that? Is that coming through? Let's see, get the light on that. It's got a little cross pattern built into the tip. And I'm not sure what the point of that is. Maybe it's just a further protection against earwax and stuff getting inside the IEM, but it is interesting that they're doing the same thing that I've seen Sennheiser do. So then here with this set of tips, I'm only gonna pull off a couple of these just to inspect them and see what's up. So on first impression, what's standing out is that these tips are very thick. The rubber on them is quite thick and meaty. Versus these other ones, bore size seems to be roughly the same, but that rubber is definitely meatier. Feels nice. And then these ones are a little bit on the thin side in terms of the rubber, a little bit maybe grippier though. These ones are almost final-ish, final E-type ear tip style, but not quite the same thing. And then they've got these like colored insides or colored cores. But enough about tips. Let's go ahead and take a look at the Zen IEM itself, and it is positioned in here. We'll poke these things out and take a look at them close up. Oh, interesting. Did you see that? They just moved themselves. So, like most dynamic drivers, there's some sort of magnet inside there, right? And it looked like the magnet is strong enough that it is drawing one IEM to the other. That's interesting. I don't think I've ever seen that before. But these are frankly some pretty stunningly beautiful IEMs. Let's go ahead and kit them up so that we see them in their natural habitat. And I'm gonna go ahead and, for this purposes, throw on these thick gray tips just because they feel special. And then we'll throw this thing on the cable as well. Let's see if I can figure out the left and the right side. That's our right, and that will likely be this guy. MMCX connectors, which is interesting because I think the other Dunu IEMs that I have are 2-pin connectors. But there you go. There is your fully kitted up Dunu Zen. I mean, does anybody disagree with me that this is a beautiful, beautiful IEM? Let's go ahead and do a quick fit test in the old ears. Yeah, this is a heavy duty feeling set. So not only are the IEMs a little bit on the heavy side, they don't feel especially heavy, but they are a little bit on the heavy side. And then being attached to this relatively heavyweight cable makes this feel pretty serious. And then in the ears, I would say, you know, fit wise, this is not as custom molded and exact fitting as the Dunu SA6 was, which was frankly one of the best IEMs that I've ever tried in my ears. But fit-wise, this seems actually pretty good. You know, I don't feel any sharp edges or anything. Isolation's not the strongest, but it's decent. And I appear to be getting a decent enough seal there with these tips. So yeah, that is the Dunu SA6. Anyone curious to see what it graphs like? Let's go ahead and throw it up in the graph. So go back down here to the table so you can see what I'm doing. And we will pull out the microphone, which, yes, that is a microphone, and plug this thing in. All right, take the 3.5 millimeter end, plug that into my output on my computer. And then show you folks my measurement screen. All right, so let's give this thing a little bit of volume, and hopefully we'll give it enough. Sensitivity was what, about 110? So that should should be plenty of volume. I'm gonna go with 4 stops of volume, and then let's go ahead and measure it. Ooh, I clipped too much volume. I need to pull it back. In case you're ever curious why I'm trying to figure out how much volume is the right amount of volume. Let's go ahead and toss that measurement real quick and do it again. There we go. And there is your frequency response of the Dunu Zen. Let's go ahead and label this thing. And for anyone, just because we're talking about it, we've got the Dunu SA6. I've got that graph loaded up here as well. Let me adjust this so that it's actually on par with it though. Just kind of moving them up so that they align at 1000 Hertz, which frankly is fairly arbitrary, but tends to be useful for understanding what to expect out of it. You know what? I don't think that's actually that useful. I think those frequency responses are so different that matching them at 1000 is actually not that useful. Let's go ahead and go with 800 instead. 600? I don't know. This is fairly arbitrary, but basically what we're trying to do is figure out how to roughly compare these two different IEM tunings. And we'll start by just looking at the Zen tuning. All right. So what we've got here that I can see is, I would describe this as a fairly V-shaped tuning signature. This bass down here in the left corner, this is pretty big stonkin bass, which maybe you would expect from a 13.5 millimeter driver, but there you go. And you get a fairly large dip into the mid-range, and then your typical ear gain here that peaks at around 2 to 2.5 thousand Hertz. And then here, this looks pretty typical here for your ear gain area, upper mid-range. This is where your vocals are going to be, and this is where, yeah, I would describe this as a fairly typical V-shaped tuning. And then down here, well, this looks like a lot of mid-treble. Let's see, make sure my resonance peak is at about 8000 Hertz. So part of this peak, I'm going to say, is definitely going to be coming from the coupler itself. Might not necessarily be a thing that you hear, but because this peak is not just isolated here, but also kind of extending over here, my guess is that there is actually a natural peak in the treble in this region, which could be problematic. We'll figure that out when we do our listening test. But that is the Dunu Zen. And then just for comparison, I'll pull up the SA6. Let me go ahead and change the color of this graph so that it's a little bit easier to read. I'll pick a gross green or something like that. Oh my gosh. I'm sorry if you're colorblind. And if you weren't colorblind before, you probably are now. Let me pick something better. All right, there we go, blue and red. So the Dunu SA6 tuning, and maybe we'll toggle back to just showing this. This for me is a very, very neutral tune. In fact, this is one of the best tuned IEMs that I've tried, just pure tonality and frequency response. This is just about ideal for me. It's got, decent amount of presence in the treble, but no big spikes. You've got some ear gain here in the upper mid-range so that vocals feel, decently forward, but not an overly sharp descent into the mid-range. And then you do have a pretty decent amount of sub-bass emphasis, but some of this is kind of compensating for the fact that it's balanced armature bass. And I don't think comes across quite as strong as it does appear here in the graph. And then if we pull back up the Zen graph again, well, we can see that especially here in the lower mid-range and upper bass area, this is quite a bit fuller here on the Zen than it was on the SA6. And then again, that big treble peak here, I have a feeling this is going to sound pretty different from the SA6, but at this point, it's kind of all speculation. So that's going to be as much as I can tell you about the Dunu Zen at this point. If you're interested in the full review, please subscribe to the channel, ding the bell, and then YouTube will let you know when I'm live with that review. In the meantime, I don't know, hang out, join the Discord server. We've got actually a room dedicated to the Dunu Zen. We'll all post some first impressions, probably some some beauty shots of this thing because it's pretty handsome, and I have a feeling I'm gonna end up taking some photographs of it. But yeah, join the Discord, join the chat, and if you haven't already, please hit the like button, and I'll see you on the next super reveal. Cheers. All right, live stream crew, what's going on? If anyone has any questions about the Zen that I can answer based on zero experience listening to it, hit me up with those questions. And I see Dunu is actually hanging around in the live chat, which is cool. I'm sure, if that's Tom, I'm sure he is helping out with a lot of answers. Very, very helpful and frankly, very honest and straightforward representative. Really appreciate that. All right, let me catch up with the live chat as best I can. It seems to be moving a little bit quick, so I apologize if I miss anything. But I'll start with the welcomes. Poop, Arthur Vasquez, Don Trumpione, Asian Hat, Juan, Jose, War Samir. How's it going? Welcome. The mature crowd. You're right, Hasgoodles. We've got the mature crowd today. Joe asked, do I remember the Creative Zen? I think I do. That was an old MP3 player, right? Creative was like one of the first MP3, no, I'm definitely showing my age, but Creative was one of the first manufacturers of large capacity MP3 players that I remember back in the day. This was like back in the 90s. And Don Trumpione, you're saying now you're wondering with a $700 price tag, how does it fare against the Moondrop S8? And that's definitely a comparison I'm going to be making. So the things that I will be comparing the Dunu Zen to, price range definitely impacts those sorts of comparisons. So the Moondrop S8 is probably my favorite at that price point right now. I am also currently listening to the Thea Audio Monarch. And then I'll probably also compare it to the Dunu SA6, even though they're a little bit apart on price. You know, Dunu's comparing them or kind of positioning them similarly, or at least as sort of like opposite ends. So I'll definitely do that comparison as well. Asian Hat, so I'm sure you said this before I graphed it. If the Zen name actually translates to the IM having a sort of relaxed tuning, I'll be quite enthused. I think based on that graph that we saw, I'm not expecting it to be a very relaxed IM, frankly. Oh, and then Dunu was clarifying about the pouch. Would you call it the sequestration pouch? That is a word I don't know. But this little pouch here for storing your IMs, saying that the reason that we have this is because of the magnets, and that kind of makes sense, right? So typically I don't really worry about things banging against each other too much, but those strong magnets in there mean that this thing might actually just be banging itself. Sounded wrong, but there you go. And so maybe it does actually make sense to use that case. I frankly don't think I'm still gonna use it just because that's pretty fiddly. And when I'm using IMs, I'm typically taking them out, putting them down, doing something, pulling them back up, and it's like it's hard to use them that flowy like, or that sort of seamlessly if I'm having to put them inside and out of a bag every time. Don Trumpione, Dunu gives pretty good accessories overall. Yeah, I gotta agree with that. Most cases that come with IMs, I'm not really a big fan of, but the Dunu ones are pretty nice. I also say that the Thea Audio ones that I've got right now with the Monarch that I have on loan, that's also a pretty nice little case. So pack-in cases can be pretty solid. Metal571, I see you in the chat. What's up? Asian Hat, the SA6 also has this cable, if you're right. I think it's basically the same cable. I actually don't know if it's exactly the same cable though. Dunu has, if you go to their website, they actually sell their cables separately, which is cool because, you know, they're pretty special cables, frankly. And they've got a bunch of different model numbers for their cables. I don't know if this is exactly the same model number as the SA6 cable, but it does, on first impression, certainly feel the same. Don Trumpion, the last flight you took was 10 years ago. It's been a long while. And then 6 years for you, David. Haven't flown since this time last year, Blue Carl Hero. Yeah, I think, all right, what was the last time I actually flew? Oh, it was actually, I flew to and from Thailand back in August of 2019. That would have been the last time I was on a plane. I frankly don't miss it. That was a really long flight and not that much fun. War Samir, you're on a no-fly list. Is that for real? I would love to hear more about that. And Kari Gori, you flew a month ago. Okay, yeah. I mean, I know flights are happening. I see airplanes in the sky. I know they're going, but man. All right, War Samir, you stormed the Capitol. I kind of doubt that. I see some talk about the power of the magnets inside the IMs at 1.8 Teslas. I definitely do not understand magnets enough to understand what that talk is about, but I appreciate the smart people talking. Metal 571, birds are magnets. That's how they know where to fly. You know what? I didn't know that, but that makes total sense. Metal 571, I expect live graphing from every channel now. Resolve is behind. I suspect, I mean, I haven't done this because I don't have a headphone measuring rig. I suspect that it's a lot more work to measure headphones. Just, I mean, with the IMs, right? I plug them into this little microphone and there's not really much thought behind it. It's pretty straightforward. With the headphones, I imagine you gotta like seat them, measure it, see if like one ear is like slightly off and like, I don't know. That just seems way more fiddly. So if Resolve wants to do it live, I'd be impressed, but I wouldn't expect it. Metal 571, Super Review has never made a mistake. I don't know about that. I've definitely made a lot of mistakes. The trick to doing live videos is not to never make mistakes, it's to just keep going. At least that's what I tell myself. It gets me through it. And now I'm seeing the response to the graphs, really nice. Sorry, so Joe S, really nice graph. I wonder if the 8K peak will give it a big soundstage. It's possible. I think typically the treble elevation that will, at least in my experience, contribute to a wider soundstage is going to happen more in this upper treble area, a little bit past the 10K. Like almost all IMs will have this little dive from about 8K to 10K to 12K. And then past that, this is sort of your air frequencies. And that's, if the treble is going to contribute to a sense of soundstage, it's typically going to be that much treble. This treble here, this is kind of going to be like the hard parts of, you know, cymbal crashes. This a lot of times were like sibilances in vocals. So we'll see how that carries through to the actual listening experience. But I don't know that I would predict soundstage from that, frankly. And then Metal 571, GME, GameStop stock, be like Zen at 8.5K. Hold. That's what I've been told. So I'll read this out because actually this is a similar thing that the Tom was saying in the Discord chat about the treble extension that we see on the Zen frequency response, all right? I'm just gonna read his comment because it's basically the same thing that he said before. The main reason for the lack of measurable treble extension is the driver mass. So it's a 13.5 millimeter dynamic driver, quite large. It's a large dynamic driver and the dome covers a larger area, or a larger proportion of the surface area versus conventional drivers. I have never made an IM, so I have no idea what that means. But it's a pretty interesting explanation. And it also follows up, the driving and restoring force at high frequencies for a heavier diaphragm is less linear, even with improved air gap and magnet system. This manifests as a large drop in the measured SPL. At the transferred impedance of the measurement system increases exponentially at high frequencies. So I appreciate you being in the live chat, being able to spin that off, because I would definitely not be able to explain that. Now, whether or not that impacts the sound, that's, again, I have no idea. I haven't heard it yet. Don Trumpion, okay, who's the one guy who always dislikes the streams? There's someone that just, you know, there's someone that's always wants a little bit of chaos. They want to see their mark on the world, and that's their way they can do it. See a lot of people telling Metal that they miss his reviews. I also miss your reviews, Metal, but I appreciate, or I understand why you don't want to do them anymore. Brandon, you're asking me what mic coupler do I use to measure? So, I mean, I don't know the name of this thing. It's just got a very specific model number. And I think from what I understand, this is a clone or something like that that's sold on AliExpress. If you want to hit me up on Discord, I can give you a link to the AliExpress listing that I ordered this from. I think it was about $90, maybe $100 for the microphone, and then I have it plugged into an Apple USB-C to 3.5 millimeter dongle that handles both the output and the input. Arthur Vasquez asking, I've never heard IMs, I've only heard Bluetooth Bose headphones. Are there actually significant differences between IMs sound-wise? So the answer is definitely yes, but obviously it's gonna vary depending on which IM and which headphone, because not all IMs and not all headphones sound the same, but there's some general patterns that you will see. So for one, the Bose Bluetooth headphones that you're talking about, that is in a class of not just Bluetooth headphones, but closed back headphones. And my personal ranking of audio categories is open back headphones is my favorite. IMs is sort of second favorite. Then probably earbuds is third favorite, even though I don't know a lot of great earbuds. And then down at the bottom is closed back headphones. Not that all closed back headphones are the worst things, but my expectations generally for closed back headphones are a lot lower than it is for open back headphones, and even still lower than my expectations for IMs. I find that IMs, in my opinion, are just they're just better closed back headphones. Closed backs are a pretty big compromise versus an open back headphone. The trade-off is that you get, the isolation, you get your audio's not bleeding, you can listen to them in public, you can listen to them sitting next to somebody that doesn't have to be listening to the same thing as you. But all those benefits I get out of IMs, and I think they sound better generally. There's just, I don't know, again, I've never designed and built headphones, so I don't know exactly what it is, but I suspect that there is just a lot of difficulty in creating these closed shells around your ears and designing acoustics that will be loud enough to make sound that you can enjoy. That closed back headphones just kind of end up being a little bit resonant and reflective and kind of muddy in general. That's a very broad generalization. It doesn't apply to all of them, but that's kind of where I start from. IMs don't seem to have that same limitation. They might have other limitations, but generally I think IMs are a better closed back headphone. Ajuna Deep, will I be cooking today? I am not cooking today, actually. I'm probably just gonna doing something in the microwave. We cook like 3 nights a week. Yesterday was one of them, today is not. And yeah, Metal, I totally agree. It's great seeing a manufacturer like Dunu here in the chat. And again, Dunu's active in the Discord server. So if you have any questions about the Zen, the SA6, anything else that they do, check out the Discord server and join. I've got a room, again, dedicated to the Dunu Zen, where you can chat them up. Not that I'm volunteering you, Tom, to be fielding questions, but I just know that it's likely going to happen. So. And everyone appreciates it. All right, well, I think that's gonna go ahead and be the end of this video. Thank you all for the chatter today. It's very active, and I think that goes to show that people are pretty interested in this here I am. One last look at the Dunu Zen. What a beauty. I'll be posting pictures of this on my Instagram, which also is linked in the description down below. But yeah, if you haven't already, please like the video. It helps me out, helps other people find the channel. Subscribe to the channel, but if you're here now, you probably already are. And then I'll see you in the next super review. Have a good night.